February 1935, London. The wind lashes against the windows of the meteorological office and grey rain cuts through the city, as if the weather itself were uneasy. In the basement of that building, surrounded by wires, dials and coils, engineer Robert Watson Watt scribbles in his notebook, "If we can hear a storm from miles away, why not an aircraft?" He doesn't know yet that this line will change the course of the Second World War. While politicians argue over treaties and Germany secretly rebuilds its air force, one man, armed only with an oscilloscope and belief in radio, tries to see what no one has seen before: an invisible enemy in the sky. Watson Watt was not a soldier. He was a meteorologist, a man of storms, lightning, and atmospheric discharges. He loved listening to the electric whisper of thunderclouds and called those bursts of static atmospheric echoes. For him, radio waves were more than tools. They were the language of nature, and he could hear what others ignored. So when the Air Ministry, in early 1935, asked him about a death ray capable of destroying aircraft from afar, he replied, "I cannot make a death ray, but I can make a death warning." He proposed something simple: use radio waves not to kill, but to notice, to detect aircraft before they strike. The officials laughed. Impossible. Radio doesn't bounce off air. But Watson Watt had seen radio waves reflect off lightning. If lightning could echo, why not the metal of a plane? He drew a sketch on a sheet of paper. 2 antennas, one transmitting, one receiving. A pulse sent out, an echo received. If the signal returned, something solid was in the sky. It was simple, and in that simplicity lay genius. When he presented the idea to the ministry, an officer asked skeptically, "You mean to say you can see an aircraft without eyes?" "Yes, sir," he said, "with ears." Laughter filled the room. But one man didn't laugh. Henry Tizard, Deputy Director of Scientific Research. He understood. "Let him try," Tizard said. "Even a mad idea is better than dead silence." For the test, Watson Watt borrowed an old BBC transmitter operating at a 6-meter wavelength. He asked the Royal Air Force for a single aircraft to fly over the site. On February 6, 1935, near Daventry, a twin-engine Handley Page Hayford lifted into the sky. On the oscilloscope, a faint green line danced. When the aircraft crossed the invisible beam, a spike flashed, an echo. "There it is," he shouted. "The invisible is visible." For the first time in history, a human being had seen an airplane using radio waves. No newspaper reported it. The project was classified. But within the ministry's walls, they whispered about the mad Scotsman. Not because he failed, but because he dared to be simple. The bureaucrats wanted theories. He brought results. The generals wanted guns. He brought antennas. They mocked him for simplicity, and simplicity was what saved them. Meanwhile, ominous reports came from Berlin. The Luftwaffe was growing fast. Airfields sprouted across Germany. Britain's intelligence feared an attack that could come from anywhere. A silent storm from the sky. Suddenly, Watson Watt's mad idea no longer sounded mad. A month later, he submitted a 12-page report, Demonstration of Aircraft Detection by Radio Reflection. It was the most important technical memo of the decade. The minister ordered an experimental station, built first at Baldock, then on the coast near Dover. Thus began Project Chain Home, a web of radar towers that would soon form a wall of warning between Britain and invasion. One night, after an exhausting trial, a young technician asked him, "Sir, do you really think this will save people?" Watson Watt replied, I don't know. But if we're wrong, no one will live to know we tried. He understood he was not just building a device, but a new human sense, a way to hear danger before it arrived. We are building ears for the island. In May 1935, on the coast of Suffolk, the first tall steel mast was raised. Local fishermen joked, "A new trap for seagulls." They didn't know it was a trap for shadows. Day by day, the system improved. Soon, it could detect aircraft 80 kilometers away. What once sounded like magic was becoming science. Still, skeptics remained. Some officers called the project an expensive curiosity. One said, "We need guns, not wires." Watson Watt answered, "Guns fire when the enemy is here. My wires warn you before he comes." Late at night, he wrote in his notebook, "They call me crazy. Perhaps I am. But if madness means refusing to be blind, I'll stay mad." He didn't know that 5 years later, his towers would hear the hum of hundreds of German engines, each blip on the green screen a question of life or death. For now, there was only silence, and one man standing beside an antenna, listening to the future. On the table, the oscilloscope glowed faintly, a thin green line trembling with quiet purpose. It looked peaceful, but somewhere beyond it, war was already moving. They laughed at the noise. He heard the future. February 1935, Cambridgeshire fields, drenched in rain. The sky hangs low and heavy, the wind dragging fog across the muddy ground. On a small hill stand 2 antennas, joined by cables to a van. Inside the van, 3 men and a strange device that looks like a BBC radio receiver repurposed by dreamers. Engineer Robert Watson Watt leans over a glowing green oscilloscope, a pencil trembling in his fingers, his eyes filled with equal parts worry and conviction. "If this doesn't work," he mutters, "they'll laugh us out of the building." The Royal Air Force has sent an old Handley Page Hayford bomber. Its pilot is ordered to fly a straight line 3 kilometers high. Watson Watt's task: catch the radio echo from the metal hull of the plane. Cables hum. The transmitter powers up. Frequency 6 meters. Power 10 kilowatts. No one knows what will happen next. 10:15 a.m. The oscilloscope flickers to life. A thin green line begins to tremble. At first, just static. Then, rhythmic pulses. "Do you see that?" whispers a technician. "That's just noise," another insists. But as the aircraft turns and flies back, the same pattern reappears. The coincidence is impossible. There it is again. Silence fills the cramped van. All eyes lock on the trembling line. The invisible sky, suddenly visible. Watson Watt straightens. His voice is calm, almost reverent. "Gentlemen, we're looking at an aircraft. The first radar contact in human history." He sinks slowly into his chair. So simple. A pulse sent, a pulse returned. But its meaning is enormous. Humanity has just learned to see with sound. He writes in his notebook, "This is not just detection, it is prediction." A week later, they repeat the test. The aircraft flies higher. The echo weakens. Watson Watt doubles the transmitter's power. The signal returns stronger. Now they can measure altitude. "Every echo tells a story," he says. The realization strikes him. He can not only detect, but measure distance. A technician, wide-eyed, whispers, "Sir, do you realize what this means? We can see the enemy before he's even on the horizon." Watson Watt replies quietly, "No, it means we now have a chance to meet him." In March 1935, he sends a secret memorandum to the Air Ministry. Detection and location of aircraft by radio methods. Formulas, calculations, oscilloscope photos, and one line that changes everything. This method can give 15 minutes of warning before attack. Those minutes will soon save thousands of lives, but not everyone believes. One officer jokes, "Signals? Witchcraft. Wars are won by guns, not waves." Watson Watt, tired, dry, unflinching, replies, "Guns kill. Waves save." A slip of the tongue, perhaps, but the truth nonetheless. The report is classified. A new facility is ordered. Bawdsey Research Station, on the windy coast, where signals can stretch across the sea. It will become the birthplace of the world's first radar network. April 22nd, 1935. Night. The team works in darkness, all lights off, only the soft hum of the transmitter. Above them, a plane flies as unseen. On the screen, a heartbeat of light. They've done it. "We have eyes that don't need light." Technician Francis Osborne notes in his log, "Signal received at 8 miles, amplitude steady, direction verified by compass." Dry lines of data, but they mark the birth of radar, a discovery that will change not just war, but the world. Afterward, they sit quietly in the dark, sipping tea. No one dares speak too loudly. Each of them knows they've just touched the future. "Sir," one says softly, "do you realize aircraft will never be able to hide again?" "I realize," he replies, "that now man might survive." By late 1935, official reports list a new acronym, RDF, Radio Direction Finding. Publicly, it's navigation. Privately, it's Britain's invisible shield. The first twin towers rise near Orford Ness, 110 meters tall, transmitter and receiver separated by miles. Now they can track not just direction, but speed. "Every mile of wire," says Watson Watt, "is a wall of sound." Germany rearms. Britain still hopes for peace, but in the ether, faint echoes whisper otherwise. Each pulse on the screen becomes a heartbeat of coming war. "They call it echo," he writes. "I call it warning." The camera rises over the wet English field. 2 lonely antennas, the shadow of a plane passing overhead. On the oscilloscope, the green line trembles, alive, like a pulse sensing the approach of a storm. For the first time, silence spoke. London, spring, 1936. Fog drapes the city. Tram bells echo over wet cobblestones. Inside the Air Ministry building on Whitehall, a closed meeting begins. Around the table sit generals, financiers, engineers. The agenda, Project RDF. At the front stands the so-called Mad Scotsman, Robert Watson Watt. Before him, the men whose decision will determine whether Britain has a chance to survive what is coming. Colonel Sir Guy Luffin opens a folder and says dryly, "Gentlemen, we are being asked to build dozens of towers as tall as cathedrals, each costing as much as a squadron of fighters, all for a radio signal that no one but Mr. Watt claims to see." A few chuckles ripple through the room. Words like madness, fantasy, waste float in the air. Watson Watt stays silent. He knows debate won't win them, only proof will. A few days later, he invites the committee to the coast at Baldock, where the prototype tower stands. At 14 now, a fairy swordfish takes off into a bright, windy sky. The officers stand on the platform. Inside the van, the oscilloscope hums. "Gentlemen," he says quietly, "watch closely. You won't see this with your eyes." A thin green line trembles. Then, a pulse. Another. Every 10 seconds, the echo repeats. "That's an aircraft," he explains. 6,000 feet up, moving at 150 miles per hour. No binoculars can find it, but the machine already has. 3 minutes later, the plane appears over the horizon. Watson Watt turns to the stunned observers. "You see, I saw him 3 minutes ago." 3 minutes. It sounds trivial now, but 4 years later, those minutes will save London. Even after the demonstration, the report reads, "Project promising but expensive, requires disproportionate resources." The Chancellor frowns. How many towers? Dozens. And they'll cost millions? Yes. Will aircraft be cheaper than this? Watson Watt meets his gaze. If I'm right, we'll save everything else. Theoretical physicists from Cambridge sneer. Radio waves are chaotic, one insists. They scatter like rain. Watson Watt replies, rain is chaotic too, yet we use it to make electricity. Meanwhile, in Germany, the Luftwaffe grows. Intelligence reports new airfields, new bombers, but London still hopes for diplomacy. To them, radar is a curiosity, not a shield. He writes to Henry Tizard, "They call me dreamer, but dreams are what stop nightmares." That spring, he arranges a night test. In darkness, the antennas catch the approach of two planes. On the screen, twin blips move across the line. The team plots their path, and 4 minutes later, the aircraft pass overhead, exactly where predicted. "Gentlemen," he tells the officers, "I present to you the first invisible map." A week later, a short memorandum lands on the Prime Minister's desk. Radar system demonstrated successfully. Recommended for coastal defense development. Signed, Henry Tizard. He argues before the cabinet, this is not luxury, it is a shield. June 1936. The government authorizes construction of the first 5 chain home stations, each over 100 meters tall, their giant antennas aimed toward the North Sea. For the first time in years, Watson Watt allows himself a small smile. They agreed to build the ears, he says. Now we must make them hear. That night, he writes in his journal, "They call it radar. I call it faith made visible." The next day, a new budget line appears. Coastal Radio Detection Network, confidential. Dry words on paper, but they will decide the fate of Britain. The camera lingers on the empty conference room. On the table, a single page lies with the handwritten note. Approved. Subject to proof. Rain patters against the window. In the glass, the reflection of Watson Watt, no longer amused, just tired, steady, and resolute. They doubted the waves. The waves never doubted them. Autumn, 1936. The North Sea broods beneath a leaden sky. On the pebbled coast of Suffolk, where waves crash endlessly against the shore, teams of engineers raise the first steel masts into the wind. Each tower rises nearly 110 meters, anchored by thick cables and heavy steel wires. Locals watch with puzzled curiosity. What are they building? Lightning catchers? They don't know it yet. These aren't radio masts. They are the first links of Chain Home, the world's most advanced early warning system. The project has been approved. 3 industrial giants, Metropolitan Vickers, Marconi, and BTH, are tasked with building a network of radar stations stretching from the Thames estuary to Scotland. Each site has 4 transmitting and 4 receiving towers, hundreds of meters of cabling, and generators humming day and night. No power failure was acceptable. Men work knee-deep in mud, hammering, welding, climbing, often under freezing rain. No one complains. They know they're building not machines, but salvation. Watson Watt is no longer just a scientist. He's a commander now. Every morning his car stops at another construction site, greeted by soldiers and engineers. He walks between the skeletal towers, hands in his coat pockets, and says quietly, "Gentlemen, build it as if time itself were the enemy." One December night, a violent storm lashes the coast. Cables snap. A tower collapses into the sea. The newspapers whisper failure. Officials demand reports. Watson Watt writes back, "The sea took a tower. Germany would take a nation. I prefer to rebuild the tower." By spring 1937, the first Bawdsey chain home station comes alive. The antennas hum softly. Electrons surge through the lines. On the green oscilloscope screens, the first echoes appear. Not just dots, but living traces of aircraft moving above the sea. We've made the sky talk. The project is immediately classified top secret. Even many engineers don't know what they're building. Documents describe it only as an experimental radio link. Only a few dozen people in Britain know the truth. These towers are the eyes of the kingdom. Young women from the Women's Auxiliary Air Service become the first radar operators. They learn to read the faint flickers on the screens, to calculate speed, altitude, direction. They don't yet realize that their hands and vigilance will one day guide the defense of London. They had no guns, but they held the first line. Summer 1937. The Royal Air Force conducts a massive exercise. 50 bombers are to launch a surprise attack to test Britain's air defenses. 6 minutes before the aircraft reach shore, chain home operators report their coordinates with precision. Fighters are scrambled on time. The enemy is intercepted before landfall. From the control log, detected at 40 miles, interception successful. The next day, the Air Minister hides a proud smile. So the towers can actually see. "They can hear, sir," Watson Watt corrects him. The report is stamped highly effective. The Prime Minister authorizes full funding. That night, Watson Watt writes in his journal, "We are building the world's first nervous system, and it already feels fear." Each chain home station can now detect aircraft at a range of 120 kilometers, accurate only within a few miles, but perfect for its purpose, to lift fighters into the air before bombs fall. Simplicity saves seconds. Seconds save cities. By 1938, German intelligence finally photographs the mysterious British towers. Berlin analysts label them air defense radio posts. None suspect that these skeletons of steel will soon shatter the myth of blitzkrieg. That autumn, Germany occupies the Sudetenland. Europe trembles. Britain sounds the alarm. For the first time, every chain home station operates 24 hours a day. In dark, humming rooms, transmitters pulse and glow. On green screens, dozens of echoes drift across the sea. Not enemies, not yet. Just the future, approaching from beyond the horizon. The camera rises over the coast. Wind whistles through the antenna wires. The sunset bleeds into the grey water. Far away, German bombers practice formation drills, unaware that they are already being seen. The towers stood silent, but they were already listening. February 1939. The North Sea lies grey and still. The air carries a damp chill and the faint electric scent of war. At the chain home station in Bawdsey, operators sit in dim light, eyes fixed on glowing green screens. Another long night of routine watch until something shifts. 19-year-old June Darling from London frowns. The line on her oscilloscope trembles. "Ma'am, I'm seeing something. Moving fast." Her supervisor leans in. The blip repeats. Steady, rhythmic, alive. Not birds, not weather. It's the echo of a metal aircraft, high and fast, coming from the east. Direction, 087 degrees. Speed, roughly 250 miles per hour. Too quick for a British Spitfire or Hurricane. Too far out to sea. He lifts the phone. Unidentified aircraft approaching East Coast. Bearing 087. The reply crackles through static. No friendly flights scheduled. Continue tracking. The room falls silent again. Only the hum of the machines remains. At the Hastings station, a second team sees the same trace. 2 stations, a cross-check. The coordinates match. "Gentlemen, we have an intruder." 4 minutes later, over the grey horizon, a black speck appears. A Heinkel He-111 reconnaissance plane. It photographs the coast, then turns for home. But before it vanishes, its shadow has already been captured. The first operational radar detection in history. A report reaches the Air Ministry. The secretary reads silently, then scribbles a note in pencil. Confirmed, system operational. For the first time, a nation has seen its enemy before he crossed the border. Inside the station, no cheers. Only the low hum of circuits and the green line steady once more. June whispers, "He was there, and then gone." She doesn't know it yet, but she's just witnessed the birth of wartime radar. The next morning, Watson Watt receives a telegram. "Enemy reconnaissance detected. Congratulations, your ghosts can see." He replies with a single line. "Not ghosts, sir, ears." The log shows the target was detected 23 minutes before reaching the coast. 23 minutes, enough time to scramble fighters, enough time to save lives. 23 minutes meant survival. Within a week, tests are repeated. More German aircraft, more detections, everyone precise. At last, the Air Ministry understands. This network isn't theory, it's a weapon. Minister Sir Kingsley Wood visits Bawdsey. He peers at the oscilloscope. The trace flickers softly. "You mean that flicker is a German?" "Yes, sir." "And you can tell where he is?" "Within a few miles." He pauses, then says quietly, "Gentlemen, we've just invented sight. Watson Watt writes that night. The sea gave us sound, the air gave us echo, and now the enemy gives us purpose." He knows this is more than science. It's the birth of a new kind of war, where victory belongs to those who see first. March 1939. All chain home stations go on permanent alert. Operators now work in shifts, day and night. Every echo logged, every anomaly studied. Outside, spring is coming, but the air already smells of powder. Meanwhile, the Luftwaffe continues reconnaissance. Their pilots report British coastline quiet. They don't realize their exact paths are being traced on glowing British screens. They thought they were unseen. They were already a dot on a screen. Late March. During RAF training exercises, a chain home crew accidentally detects a flock of migrating geese. For a moment, they think it's an incoming raid. When the truth is revealed, the entire room bursts into laughter. "It means the system works," one technician says. "It means even nature can't hide anymore," another replies. In April, German radio monitors intercept strange pulses from Britain's east coast. They assume they're navigation beacons, but one Berlin officer mutters, "No, gentlemen, it's something else." He's right, but far too early to understand. At dawn, May 3rd, 1939, the chain home receivers hum again. June Darling leans over her screen, the green light dancing across her face. "Another one," she whispers. Far across the sea, Germany's new Freya radar begins its first experiments, years behind. Too late. The camera fades to her quiet figure, the soft light of the oscilloscope glinting in her eyes. Outside, waves crash and gulls cry. She sits still, listening to the heartbeat of a nation. Before a single bomb fell, Britain already knew where the shadow would come from. June 1939. The sun rises over the grey waters of the Suffolk coast. The tall masts of the chain home towers hum in the morning mist. At the radar stations, Bawdsey, Orford, Hastings, Operators take their posts, eyes fixed on the green glow of their screens. It's routine now. The quiet crackle of the oscilloscopes has become the heartbeat of dawn. But today, the heartbeat changes. Multiple signals, not the lone echoes of reconnaissance planes, not the rare blips of weather. This is formation, entire groups of aircraft moving together, steady, deliberate, organized. Multiple echoes, approaching from northeast, same altitude, same course. The room falls, silent. No one breathes. This isn't observation anymore. It's rehearsal for war. In London, deep beneath Whitehall, an officer at the Air Ministry reads a radio dispatch from Bordsey. Heavy aerial activity detected over North Sea, possibly formation drills. The message becomes the first line in a new report. German air exercises, summer 1939. Within hours, confirmations arrive from other stations. Everywhere the same pattern. Tight formations flying parallel to the European coast from Holland to Denmark. Too organized for practice, too close for comfort. On the plotting tables, operators mark red flags for enemy aircraft, blue for British posts. The maps fill quickly, red spreading like blood. They're mapping the channel. The phrase is whispered first in that room, but it carries the weight of revelation. The Luftwaffe isn't training. It's rehearsing invasion. Watson Watt arrives at headquarters. On the wall, a map of Britain, webbed in lines from every chain home station. Tizard points at the clustered signals. They're flying at 10,000 feet. Same spacing, same timing. Not reconnaissance, formation. Watson Watt asks quietly, formation for what? Tizard looks back. For invasion. Watson Watt says nothing. He knows the hum of his towers has turned into the sound of approaching thunder. A week later, Mi-6 intercepts reports from Germany. Bomber units regrouping in Kiel and Wilhelmshaven. Officially, training flights. Unofficially, preparation. Radar confirms it. Flights increase nightly. Routes repeat with precision. They're rehearsing darkness, an operator mutters. The Germans begin flying lower, trying to slip beneath the radar beams. But Chain Home still sees them. The signal weakens, but it doesn't vanish. Watson Watt writes in his notebook, "The sea amplifies what they try to hide." It's the first recorded instance of radar defeating stealth. August 1939. War is only weeks away. In the underground war room on Whitehall, ministers and officers gather around a projected map of the North Sea. Red lights blink, each one a German flight logged in the last 48 hours. Tizard speaks first. "Gentlemen, the Germans are already at war. They just haven't told anyone yet." No one disagrees. The silence is the answer. Watson Watt receives the order. All Chain Home stations, permanent combat readiness. From now on, radar reports go directly to fighter command. Britain will listen to the sky without pause. We are now living by the rhythm of the echo. Late evening, Bordsey Station. The line flares, bright, sharp. 3 fast-moving echoes along the coast. Then more, wave after wave. Not drills, not tests. A prelude. The next morning, September what? 1939. Germany invades Poland. Before the newspapers print the headlines, Chain Home has already heard it happen. Our ears heard the start of the war. September 2nd. Chain Home picks up new signals. German bombers sweeping the Dutch coast. Their flight paths trace invisible arrows toward London, Norfolk, Kent. The first targets of a war that hasn't yet touched British soil. Germany waits. Britain listens. The Ministry of Aviation report reads, "For the first time in history, an enemy's plans were visible before execution." Chainholm has become a mirror, and in that mirror, Britain sees the face of the coming storm. Watson Watt steps outside the War Office at dawn. Across the sky, faint white contrails linger, the scars of the night's flights. The sea wind smells of salt and smoke and something inevitable. They think they're unseen, he murmurs, but the air itself tells on them. The camera pans over the operations room, maps glowing under red lamps, young women moving markers across great tables, officers murmuring coordinates. Outside, the city still sleeps in peace. Inside, the war has already begun. Before the first bomb, there was the first echo, July 1940. The heat lies heavy over the Kent coast. The air tastes of salt and fear. The Chainholm towers hum day and night. Their screens never go dark. Every day the Germans fly reconnaissance, but in London's war rooms, everyone already knows. These flights aren't observation. They are rehearsal. The first great battle between human eyes and machine ears is about to begin. August 13th, 1940. 05:20 a.m. At the Pevensey radar station, operator Joan Clark frowns at her screen. A faint trace stretches across the green glow, not flickering, not fading, but thick, solid, alive. That's a formation, she says. How big? Too big. The signal grows. Direction, south, from Calais toward Dover. The first great Luftwaffe assault has begun. At RAF Fighter Command Headquarters in Uxbridge, 3 more stations confirm the sighting. The filter room bursts into motion. Women move markers across the great table, green for friendly, red for enemy, and the red markers multiply too fast to count. Raid approaching Channel, 60 miles out, altitude 15,000 feet. The telephone operators relay coordinates to every squadron. At Biggin Hill, sirens wail. Pilots sprint for their Spitfires. They see nothing yet, but the radar already sees them. 12 minutes. That's all the warning the radar gives. But 12 minutes will change history. 12 minutes meant life. As the German bombers cross the channel, British fighters climb through the clouds. When the two forces meet over Dover, the RAF is already above them, waiting. What once was mocked as a madman's idea has become a weapon of foresight. The sky roars, engines scream, tracer fire cuts the morning haze, flaming debris rains into the sea. Below, in the radar huts, another battle rages, silent, tireless. Each flicker on the screen is a heartbeat. Each vanishing trace, a life. Plot fading. Possible crash. Confirm kill. Move marker. The war is fought in whispers and echoes. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding stands in the command room. Radar has become our eyes, he says. We must trust it more than the sky itself. And he's right. Clouds, darkness, weather. None can hide the enemy now. Every Luftwaffe sortie paints its own ghost across Britain's screens. August 18th, 1940. Prime Minister Winston Churchill visits Fighter Command. He watches the women at their maps, their hands guiding tiny markers across England's outline. Small lights, a nation's pulse. He turns to the officers and says softly, "Never before have so many owed so much to so few." He will speak it again later in Parliament, but here, in this quiet underground room, the words are born. A salute not to the pilots, but to the silent listeners. The Luftwaffe soon realizes the British know their paths too well. Reconnaissance reports reach Goering. Strange radio towers along the coast. The order comes. Bomb them. One tower near Dover is hit, another in Suffolk burns. But within a day, both are back online. Backup generators hum, replacement antennas rise. They can bomb towers, but they can't bomb the air. August 20th. The battle peaks. Hundreds of radar contacts, some false, some fatal. The plotting rooms are suffocatingly hot. No one leaves their post. "You don't breathe between echoes," one officer mutters. "Every second counts. Every echo could save a city." When the Germans shift their routes, the radar spots the maneuver instantly. Fighter command moves to intercept, catching the bombers before they even know they're seen. A captured Luftwaffe pilot later says, "It was as if they knew where we were before we did." He never learned. They truly did. By the end of August, the Luftwaffe has lost over 600 aircraft. Britain, around 300. But Britain still stands. Operation Sea Lion is postponed, indefinitely. In the radar stations, operators weep from exhaustion. "We didn't win by shooting," one says. "We won by listening." September brings calm seas. The towers still rise against the dawn, scarred by shrapnel but standing firm. The radar screens glow faintly, just the hum of peace returning. The operators go home, knowing that in their silence they saved an island. Watson Watt writes in his journal, "They called it radar. I call it the proof of patience." For the first time in history, a nation had triumphed not by might, but by precision, not by fire, but by the whisper of waves. The camera lifts over the coastline. The sun breaks through smoke-stained clouds. The chain home towers stand battered but alive. Far off, Spitfires return to base. On the screens, only a calm, steady line. The battle is over. The towers never fired a shot, but they won the battle. September 1940. London burns. Every night the sky glows red. The roar of bombs, the scream of sirens, searchlights slicing through smoke and dust. Thousands of homes are gone, but the city still stands. Beneath that blazing sky, in the underground war rooms beneath Whitehall, Prime Minister Winston Churchill waits in a concrete room, head bowed over a map of air raids. Beside his cold tea and overflowing ashtray lies a note. Radar confirms early detection again. He looks up as the door opens. A quiet man enters, spectacled, calm, carrying no medals, no uniform. Dr. Robert Watson Watt. Churchill studies him for a moment, then says with a gravelled smile, "So you're the man with the invisible shield." Watson Watt shifts awkwardly. "No, sir. I'm just the man who built the ears." Churchill rises, crosses the room, and clasps his hand. "Then, my friend, you have given Britain its eyes back." There is no applause, no speeches, only two men standing in the dim light, and the unspoken truth that without those strange towers on the coast, London might already be ash and silence. Churchill finally says, "They laughed at you, didn't they?" "Yes, sir. And yet here we are, alive to laugh back." Later, walking through the bombed streets, Watson Watt passes smoking ruins. Children huddle in basements. Women carry buckets of water. Soldiers fight fires with bare hands. He stops, looking at them, realizing that his invention doesn't live in the towers or machines, but in these faces. Every life saved, he thinks, is an echo that returned. No one knows his name. Newspapers celebrate the fighter pilots, the aces, the commanders, the heroes of the sky, but not the man who heard the enemy before anyone else. Chain home remains Britain's deepest secret. When his young daughter asks, "Daddy, are you in the war?" he smiles. "Yes, but my battlefield is silence." In the radar stations, the work never stops. Operators, women barely out of school, engineers, mechanics, sit before glowing screens, hour after hour. Every echo is a warning, every fading signal, someone's end. They fight a war of patience and precision. The invisible soldiers. Watson Watt feels their courage as his own. That autumn, he writes to his wife, "I have seen what silence can do. Our machines are not weapons. They are prayers made of metal." A few weeks later, a telegram arrives from President Franklin D. Roosevelt. "Your country's early warning system is a marvel. The free world owes it a debt." The British reply is simple. "We call it radar." It's the first time the word appears in official diplomatic correspondence. November 1940. King George VI invites Watson Watt to Buckingham Palace. No reporters, no ceremony, only the quiet of marble halls and the echo of footsteps. As the king places the Order of Merit in his hand, he says, "History will know you when it's allowed to." Watson Watt bows, but in his heart he thinks of the hum of the towers, the green screens, the girls who never slept through the Blitz. Back at the lab, the engineers work late, soldering new generators, replacing burnt-out tubes. He sits beside a young technician and says, "They finally believe in the invisible." The man smiles. "It only took a war." Watson Watt nods. He knows victory doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like exhaustion mixed with guilt. "Our silence saved thousands," he writes, "but every missed echo will haunt me." One evening he visits Bawdsey Station again. When he steps out of the car, the operators stop their work and begin to applaud. He freezes, shy, then smiles. A young radio operator walks up and hands him a small metal plate, cut from an old cable. Etched on it, "To the man who heard before all others." He holds it gently, and for the first time in years, he has no words, only quiet pride. Cut back to Churchill's office. The ashtray is full. The map of raids still lies open. In the center of the desk, a photograph of the chain home towers, black silhouettes against the sea. "They said he was crazy," Churchill murmurs to himself. "He said he was careful, and careful men build miracles." Winter 1941. The Norfolk coast lies frozen under snow and sleet. The sea growls, wind whips over dunes, and ice coats the steel skeletons of the chain home towers. They stand like ghosts, humming, crackling, alive. A few miles away, in a small fishing village, a rubber dinghy slides silently onto the shore. Two men in German naval coats step onto the sand. Their boots crunch softly. One carries a Leica camera, the other a folded map marked, "Photograph the coastal towers." The Abwehr calls it Operation Seagull. Its mission: discover what these strange British towers are and why the Luftwaffe keeps losing planes along the coast. Agents Paul Kramer and Otto Weigand move through the dunes, guided only by the moonlight and the hiss of the wind. Ahead, the silhouettes of the towers loom, black ribs against the snow, buzzing faintly with unseen power. "Radio stations," whispers Weigand. "No, something else," replies Kramer. He lifts his camera. The flash glints off steel for a split second. Then, a shout. A searchlight sweeps the ridge. The British patrol has seen them. 2 hours later, the men sit in a dark interrogation room at MI5's Ipswich outpost. On the table, the Leica, maps, coiled cables, and a half-burned notebook. An officer speaks calmly. "What did you think those towers were?" "Radio? For ships." "And did you ever see a ship talk back?" Kramer says nothing. He's seen too much and understood too little. In London, the head of counterintelligence, Sir William Stevenson, receives the report. Enemy agents attempted to photograph Bawdsey installation. He writes in the margin, increase coastal patrols. Their curiosity means fear. In Berlin, the Abwehr reviews the intercepted photos. The images are grainy, the structures immense. They label them Funkmasten zur Seeüberwachung, radio masts for sea surveillance. Engineers present their analysis to Hermann Göring. They transmit high-frequency signals, possibly navigational. Göring scowls. Navigation. Then why do our bombers vanish over their coast? Meanwhile, the British establish a new defense unit, the Chain Home Security Division, led by Dr. Arthur Mitchell, a former student of Watson Watt. He gathers his team and says, "We guard silence. No leaks, no publications, no radio chatter. Every word could cost us a city. From now on, every scientific paper mentioning frequency, pulse, or wave is censored twice before print. Even university lectures are rewritten. To mislead German intelligence, the government leaks a cover story to the press. The coastal towers are BBC transmitters for overseas broadcasts. Photos of the towers appear in newspapers under that harmless label. The Germans believe it, partly. They spend months developing jamming transmitters that have no effect on radar at all. A lie that protects truth, wrote Mitchell, is worth 10 truths that destroy it. Spring, 1941. A German U-boat operator off the English coast records a strange pulse, repeating every 25 seconds. The signal is sent to Berlin. Engineers reconstruct it in the lab. Result: signal emits, does not detect. Conclusion: useless. Irony: they had just built the first German radar and failed to recognize it. Around the same time, Watson Watt receives an unsigned letter. No return address, just one sentence. You gave them ears. Now they listen for you. He stares at the paper for a long moment, then burns it to ash. Mi-5 tightens security around every chain home station. Operators are instructed, do not discuss signals, not even among yourselves. The word radar becomes classified. Speaking it in public means court-martial. Our silence is now a weapon, says Mitchell. Night, winter, 1941. Snow drives across the Kent coast. The towers stand sheathed in frost, wires humming softly in the gale. 2 soldiers keep watch. Strange place, one mutters. You feel the air listening. That's because it does, the other answers. Archival footage flickers. Agents creeping through dunes, frozen coastlines, searchlights sweeping across ice, the towers gleaming like skeletons in the storm. They tried to steal what they couldn't see, and what they couldn't see had already won. 1945. Berlin has fallen. The war is over. Along the British coast, the chain home towers still stand, rusted, humming softly in the sea wind, worn down, but unbroken. They no longer listen for bombers. Their signals now drift into peaceful skies. Operators power down the sets. The green screens fade to black. Antennas fall silent. And into that silence, long lost, peace returns. October to 1945. At Bawdsey Station, the last technicians crate up the remaining equipment. Wooden boxes stamped Air Ministry Property. On the wall, someone has written in chalk. They came. We heard. We stood. The chief technician flips the main switch. For the first time in 6 years, the room fills not with the hum of radio waves, but with stillness. The silence sounds different now, he says. It's peace. Robert Watson Watt returns home to Scotland. Older, greyer, but with the same quiet resolve. Journalists meet him at the station. The world now knows his name. So you're the man who built radar? He smiles. No, I just listened when everyone else was talking. The newspapers call him the man who heard the enemy first. but he always corrects them. It wasn't me. It was the team, the towers, the girls with the screens. Before Parliament, he gives a short speech. War forced us to look beyond sight. Now let peace teach us to listen beyond fear. He speaks of a new future, one where the same science that predicted death will predict the weather. 1947. British meteorologists installed the first civilian radar to track storms and rainfall. The screens flicker with familiar dots. Not bombers now, but clouds. Same echoes, one technician says. Different reason to hope. In America, former chain home engineers help create the Cleveland Air Traffic Control Project, the birth of modern flight safety. A new profession is born, the air traffic controller. Now radio waves no longer warn of danger. They guide travelers home. What once saved cities now saves lives in the sky. By the 1950s, Watson-Watt's principles form the backbone of space surveillance. Radar becomes humanity's new vision, an eye not for war, but for wonder. The Soviet Sputnik, the NORAD network, all trace their lineage to those towers that once guarded an island. The sky that once hid enemies now carries explorers. 1955. Britain marks 20 years since Watson-Watt's first experiment. On the Suffolk coast, a small plaque is unveiled on the site of the old tower. Here, man first heard the air speak. Watson-Watt stands beside it, holding his faded notebook. Echo Experiments, 1935, 1957. The BBC invites him for a broadcast. A journalist asks, "If you had known your invention would cause both death and salvation, would you have built it?" He pauses. Yes, because the choice was never between war and peace. It was between blindness and awareness. After his death in 1973, historians call him the man who gave the world hearing. His legacy lives in every radar, every satellite, every aircraft that lands safely through fog. But to those who knew him, he remains simply the mad Scotsman, not mad at all, just the one who listened farther than anyone else. The camera drifts over the Suffolk coast. The old chain home towers rise against the grey sky, bent by time but still alive. The sea whispers, and beneath it, faintly, the eternal hum of the air. The war is gone, but the echo never fades. On screen, dedicated to those who listened, the shot lingers on an ancient oscilloscope. A green line trembles, then flares. Just once, an echo. It began as a flicker on a screen, and it became the heartbeat of the modern world.